Hi, this workshop is titled Using Technology for UUPG Engagement. Because I work in a place where security is a concern, I can't tell you my name, but I'll tell you that I'm connected to some projects like Kingdom.training, Disciple.tools, and Zume.training. Our topic today is a very important one because all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, Romans 3:23. Because God raised Jesus up, loosing the pangs of death, because it was not possible for him to be held by it, Acts 2:24. Because until we complete what lacks in regard to the sufferings of Christ, it won't matter for these people who have never been able to hear about Jesus. Colossians 1:24. Because the scenes of people from every tongue, tribe, and nation being before the throne and worshiping the Lamb cannot happen until every tongue, tribe, and nation hears about him. Revelation 7:9 and 10. And because this gospel has not been preached to the ends of the earth, so then the end can come. Matthew 24:14. Our topic is connected to the Great Commission and sharing the gospel to all UUPGs because our names were written into this story before the creation of the world. Check out Revelation 13:7 and 8. And because Jesus completed his work and now sends us out as he was sent, but we haven't completed ours. John 17:4 through 18. I hope to serve you, God, and even UUPGs by presenting my perspectives and experiences to you in the context of the formula for change. D times V times F has got to be greater than R. In the formula for change, which you could find on Wikipedia, the D stands for dissatisfaction with the status quo. The V for vision of a better way, the F for first steps, and the R for resistance to change. I'm going to illustrate the formula for change through the David and Goliath history found in 1 Samuel 17:4 through 54. You likely know it well. A giant nearly 10 feet tall stepped out from the Philistine line into the open, Goliath from Gath. He had a bronze helmet on his head and was dressed in armor, 126 pounds of it. He wore bronze shin guards and carried a bronze sword. His spear was like a fence rail. The spear tip alone weighed over 15 pounds. His shield bearer walked ahead of him. In verse 8, Goliath stood there and called out to the Israel troops, "Sorry, why bother using your whole army? Am I not Philistine enough for you? And you're all committed to Saul, aren't you? So pick your best fighter and pit him against me. If he gets the upper hand and kills me, the Philistines will all be your slaves. But if I get the upper hand and kill him, you will all become our slaves and serve us. I challenge the troops of Israel this day. Give me a man, let us fight it out together." This was a battle of champions with the winner gets all, the land, the slaves, everything. And the loser gave up the land and became the slaves. It was a battle of the champion between the mightiest, most intimidating, most experienced Philistine warrior and, well, up to this point in the story, nobody. To this point, nobody was dissatisfied enough with the situation that they would take action. But then came David. He was dissatisfied and told Saul he would fight. And now we'll look for the example of him having a vision for the better way. In verse 40, we find, "Then David took his shepherd's staff, selected 5 smooth stones from the brook, and put them in the pocket of his shepherd's pack, and with his sling in his hand approached Goliath." In verse 43, the Philistine ridiculed David. "Am I a dog that you come after me with a stick?" And he cursed him by his gods. David answered, You come at me with sword and spear and battle axe. I come at you in the name of the God of the angel armies, the God of Israel's troops, whom you curse and mock. This very day, God is handing you over to me. I'm about to kill you, cut off your head, and serve up your body and the bodies of the Philistine buddies to the crows and coyotes. The whole earth will know that there's an extraordinary God in Israel. And everyone gathered here will learn that God doesn't save by means of sword and spear. The battle belongs to God. He's handing you to us on a platter. So the next element of the formula for change we'll see is that David knew how to take first steps. In verse 48, that roused the Philistine, and he started toward David. David took off from the front line, running toward the Philistine. David reached into his pocket with a stone, slung it, and hit the Philistine hard in the forehead, embedding the stone deeply. The Philistine crashed face down in the dirt. In 51, then David ran up to the Philistine and stood over him, pulled the giant sword from his sheath, and finished the job by cutting off his head. When the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they scattered, running for their lives. The men of Israel and Judah were up on their feet, shouting. They chased the Philistines all the way to the outskirts of Gath and to the gates of Ekron. Wounded Philistines were strewn along the Shaaraim road all the way to Gath and Ekron. So, in the story, basically we see that David was dissatisfied, provoked by a misalignment between the covenant of God and his current situation. He had an idea of a better way forward, and he literally took first steps overcoming the status quo. Now we'll look quickly at the three variables along the way. Dissatisfaction, the D. In my opinion, this is the most important variable. Where it's strong, the other variables, vision and knowledge of first steps, grow stronger too. I think our dissatisfaction has to flow from a burning anguish that God's will is not being done on earth as it is in heaven, on God's covenants not yet being fulfilled. Jesus seemed to have this drive. Scripture repeatedly said, he did this to fulfill what was written. Nothing else for him was an option. Even in Mark 10:32 through 34, we see a case study that proves nothing could stop Jesus. In verse 32 it says, and they were on the road going up to Jerusalem, and Jesus was walking ahead of them, and they were amazed, and those who followed were afraid. And taking the 12 again, he began to tell them what was about to happen to him, saying, see, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and the scribes, and they will condemn him to death and deliver him over to the Gentiles. And they will mock him and spit on him and flog him and kill him, and after 3 days he will rise. Nothing could stop Jesus from wanting God's will to be done, from the covenants being fulfilled. We see this also in Paul with his ambition. If you read Romans 15, especially around verse 20, you'll see that he had a great ambition for God's covenants being fulfilled, for his will happening. And you could even hear it in the testimony of our work where we're located. Basically, my testimony is that I grew up in a Christian family, and in my childhood there was a lot of sickness around me. I spent hundreds and hundreds of days in hospitals with loved ones, and often wondering, would they breathe another breath? I came to believe that, to know that God is important and people were important. And when I realized that Jesus was about the task of bringing people from every tongue and tribe and nation before his throne, I realized that if I truly was following him, I would have to dedicate my life to this same proposition. So ultimately that led me overseas, and with my wife, and eventually a team formed around us and some other founding members. And we started to try to figure out how can we bring the hope of the gospel to these people. When we arrived, there was about one believer for every 40,000 Muslims where we were located. A famous international news source said that the nation had the most intrusive cyber police state in the world. Thankfully, we had a little bit of fruit in our first year that we were in country. And yet, as I considered that fruit, I realized that what we were doing really was not going to make a big dent in the need if we were here 5 years or 10 years or 15 years or longer. And so I started wrestling to figure out, God, what's the deal? There's such a gap between the greatness of what Jesus did on the cross and what's happening. And I felt like God brought to mind the passage from Revelation that says, the Spirit and the bride say, come, and convicted me that it wasn't the Spirit's work that was holding us back, that it was his bride's. And so I started trying to evaluate everything I could, assuming that even good things might not be sufficient. And in that season, I felt like God led me to consider what seemed like a terrible idea, using the internet in a cyber police state to try to proclaim the gospel. Though I had almost no skill in that, with some perseverance and Google searches, eventually I was able to get something going. And we've been able to see disproportionate fruit in our context since then. I share this with you in part to just say that I'm content to someday stand before Jesus saying that this is what I've done with my finite number of breaths and heartbeats. But the real question is, how about you? How about your story? Are you content with your status quo? Do you feel like your ministry is fine or good or great as it is? Are you okay with the state of the world? Or are you wanting to see something even greater? Do you have a gospel ambition? The next variable is V or vision. And basically, my belief is that the key to right vision is to understand the covenants of God. This set of covenants, these promises are going to happen. Genesis 12:1 through 3 will become a reality. All nations will be blessed through Christ. For me, this is like reading tomorrow's newspaper today and betting on the football game or the stock market accordingly. We know that people from every tongue, tribe, and nation, all UUPGs, will become UPGs and then just people groups. And we have a chance to weave our story into their story. Hebrews 11 says that people who can see this kind of stuff from afar please God. So if you believe God's promises and covenants, you're well on your way to having right vision. Another key aspect of vision is just to know God's word in general, to get to know him, to see how he acts through man and through history and through opportunities. He has given us all kinds of case studies, ranging from strategic location of Israel as a people between several continents and then choosing them to be his royal priesthood of nations. He's given us another case study in bringing Christ forth in the same area now or at that moment in the presence of the Roman Empire, which greatly eased transport with an intricate road system between these continents and with boat systems and so forth. And of course, he's given us an incredible case study in the book of Acts, and especially with Paul's work as he tirelessly worked towards engaging a specific audience, mostly God-fearing Greeks, and where he went to find those people, synagogues, places of prayer, and how he relentlessly went, 10,000 miles or 16,000 kilometers to do this work. Another aspect of vision is familiarity with current events, to understand what's going on in the world. This is relevant to the topic of technology for our workshop, to consider, how Bluetooth networks can be made between devices to form mesh networks that are really unstoppable by governments or anybody else. How discrete SD flash memory cards can be used to distribute content from phone to phone to phone or whatever quickly. How apps can be made to work offline or to be sent from one phone to another in some cases. How solar-powered equipment for audio or video can be used. How portable printing presses can be used, and much more, of course. And in the technology, of course, we have to think a bit about the internet, at least. We've found that this is where people turn for their questions. When I felt like God wanted us to use this, I didn't get it yet. I didn't understand that whenever He would give people dreams or visions or convict them of things, that they wouldn't be turning to their brothers or their families for answers to their questions, but that they would be going to Google. And now we've learned that through time here. GMO says that 90% of the world, including UUPGs, lives within range of a cellular tower. Jonathan Project's Dan Scrivener recently told me that about 60% of the world are active internet users, according to Statistica.com. And he reminded me that SpaceX's Starlink project aspires to make the other 40% be able to use the internet within the next couple of years by 2021 by placing low altitude, low latency satellite networks in place around the Earth. So, on the topic of vision, how is your vision? Do you know God's covenants? Do you know Him personally through His Word? Are you benefiting from the case studies that He has given you about how to work and how to engage and how He relates to people and through people? Do you have a feel for what's going on at such a time as this in technology or in world needs? Do you, like the men of Issachar, know the times and know what God's people should do? 1 Chronicles 12:32. The next variable we're going to look at is F for first steps. If you have a fire built in your bones from all this other stuff, the covenants and your belief and your vision, if you know that God is on the move and works through ordinary people who spend time with Jesus, if you buy into what the identity that God tries to make us have for ourselves whenever we see His perspective towards us in the start of almost all of the epistles, the writings that are saying, He's chosen us, we're predestined, we're His priesthood, if you buy into all this stuff, if you believe it all, then you're going to be looking for first steps to see how you can go into action. Obviously, there's not an answer for this or a single strategy, but I would like to share with you our experience based on engaging the people group we work in, and also our efforts to now engage 10 other people groups in our location that are unengaged at present. So the first recommendation I make to you is that you would spy out the land. Just go and see what happens. Do a 12 spies go down to Canaan kind of a trip to see what's going on there. There's an article on kingdom.training that can be used within the MVP course that's on there, how to use media. There's an article that talks about going and trying to figure out who your audience is. Now, you may be able to attend to some of this through doing searches by asking a lot of questions of people who have had encounters, but basically one of the things you need to do is figure out who is your audience. Are they employed? Are they in families? Are they leaders? What's their age? What kind of relationships do they have? How educated are they? Are they literate? What's their socioeconomic status? What do they think of Christians? What do they think of foreigners? Where do they live? Urban, rural. And then you can also look for first steps related to how they use media. Is it at home what's the device? What hours? Is it when everybody else is in bed? Is it on the way to work? Are they doing it primarily through phones or computers or televisions or tablets? And what kind of media are they consuming? And then you can think through, what do you hope this persona or this people will do with the media that you would give them? Private message you on a social media page, or share content with others, or read an article, or call you, or so forth. Part of this step for first steps that I would encourage you to consider is that you need to be prepared for failure and relentless perseverance. David took 5 stones with him. He was prepared to fail in his first attempts. You need to also, I think, embrace the ask, seek, knock paradigm. Matthew 7:7's description of this ask, seek, knock should help us understand that a lot of times there's a progression in our relationship with God and in our work for Him. We may only at first know to start off asking a lot of questions, and ultimately those questions may lead to us finding ways to seek even more information. And with some seeking, there may come a time where we're ready to go into action, to knock, to do things that are even more intentional. In this, even if you don't know answers to some of your questions, you're almost always guaranteed to upgrade your questions, and that too is a form of progress. Also, in the topic of first steps, I recommend that you take an Occam's razor approach that looks for the simplest possible solutions to your problems. Things are hard enough. We don't need to make them harder. Can we find somebody from the UUPG that's easily accessible? Perhaps they've moved to a capital city to participate in a certain type of industry that they excel in. If not, are there people that you can partner with that are closer culturally to the target group than you are? Do you need tools to help keep straight different relationships and contacts that you have going? I mentioned to you that Disciple.tools is a free open source customer relationship management tool that can be used in a lot of languages to track early movements and late, and to serve with media usage as well. I also would recommend that you find tools that serve at least trade languages. One that I would tell you that I believe so strongly in, that I've dedicated a lot of time to it, is Zume.training. It's been particularly helpful for our work with a UPG. And basically Zume.training is an online course that helps people know how to pursue movements. And it's already in it's high 20s languages, and aspires to soon be in 40. Those 40 languages are spoken by 5.3 billion plus people, and so there's a good chance that they would be relevant for your UUPGs in a trade language at least. I also recommend as first steps that you check out the course that I mentioned to you earlier on Kingdom.training. It'll basically help you see how media might be useful to engage seekers and to accelerate disciple multiplication. And I encourage you also to check out what media already exists that you can use, rather than feeling like you have to invent your own media. Mobile Ministry Forum has some great resources that you should check out as well, because mobile phones are one of the forms of technology that is most prevalent throughout the world. As another first step, I commend to you that you check out PrayForTunisia.com. They have a great illustration of how they're mobilizing prayer for unengaged, unreached people groups you can click on their 2020 link if you go to pray4tunisia.com. And also, if you just want to start a prayer network in support of your vision, you can check out their article called How to Start a World-Changing Prayer Network under the Resources tab. Another step you might want to take would be figuring out how to get a story set from the Bible into the local dialect if that's a need. So basically, in our time together, we've looked at the formula for change, which focuses on dissatisfaction with the status quo, vision for a better way, first steps. And then the question is, does all of that you have, does that exceed, is it greater than your resistance for change? What you're considering doing is going to require a lot of innovation, a lot of effort, but God uses people like us when we dedicate ourselves to Him. I want to encourage you that as you consider the different concepts shared in this video, that you need to be careful not to put on Saul's armor. You remember in the story of David and Goliath, Saul tried to get David to put on his armor. I'm not telling you that you need to do any of these things, but I hope at least this paradigm of the formula for change will help you think through what's holding you back in terms of engaging and engaged people groups, and perhaps partners who also you may need to move forward. May you ultimately, though, pray and be led by the Spirit, and may you do something crazy, even running towards these giants, believing that God's covenants will hold firm for you and your ministry. I'm going to put a few resources for you on the end of the video here, and I pray that God will bless and use you in your endeavors for Him. Thank you very much.